Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to have you here for tonight's Town Hall number 8. We will be just starting off with a video, and then Howard will be giving a brief introduction into tonight's event. So we'll just get started with this video here.
If I was in your place, I would not want it on my conscience to turn the Beaver Valley into the Cancer Valley.
I really hope that we don't have to decide between jobs and health. I think there are other options.
Is it worth poisoning the children and family members for a few jobs in a dying industry?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
How many want clean air? How many want clean water? How many want clean earth?
No person's job has a right to make me, my family, and my neighbors sick.
The Shell ethane cracker plant will be a major source of air pollution for local communities and in the region.
Along with the cracker comes the fracking that feeds it. That means frac wells, that means compressor stations, cryogenic plants, injection wells, pipelines, diesel trucking, and rail transport and train bombs.
Each step has risk. Each step generates pollution. Each step is known to cause ill health. Each step is a step backwards.
And all of this is rolled out piecemeal by the industry so that people never see the big picture.
I'm asking for the DEP to decline the permits as submitted.
Pipelines fail because pipelines fail.
Shell was responsible for 194 pipeline incidents since 2002, totaling some $183 million in damages.
The cracker plant's also a disaster from a climate perspective. This one plant alone will emit 2.2 million tons of CO2 per year, which is the same as 430,000 passenger cars on a road for a year.
Some have refrained from speaking out in fear of retribution.
We just care about the health of our communities. The people who will be most affected are going to be the elderly and children.
It will be the largest emitter of volatile organic compounds in the Southwestern PA. Some of the schools that would be most impacted by air pollution from the Shell ethane cracker plant are Central Valley School District, Beaver Area School District, and Rochester Area School District.
It's called Cancer Alley for a reason.
Deny these permits! We want to breathe and drink water here.
Have I stepped out of a time machine? Is this 1956 as opposed to 2016? Because we must have traveled back in time if we're still talking about fossil fuels.
The oil and gas industry will make billions. Out-of-state construction workers get the jobs, and Beaver Countyans will get polluted air and water.
Why would we want to add to our burden? This takes us in the wrong direction.
I feel that this is an insidious, violent abuse of all of us.
It will not make Western PA or Potter great again. It will make cancer, heart disease, and asthma great again.
We have alternatives. We need the political will to pursue them.
I'm Howard Rieger, convener of the Grassroots Air Quality Steering Committee that has planned 7 of these virtual town halls over the last year. Today, we're going to hear from the Beaver County Marcellus Awareness Community, BMAC for short, a group formed over a decade ago to confront the threat to their water supply posed by fracking. In recent years, the urgency of their mission has grown exponentially due to the construction and imminent opening of the plant that you just saw depicted. And if we needed a reminder of how geographically and topographically ill-suited our area is for air polluting industries, the air pollution warnings and the horrible air that we have lived with for the last several days says all that's need to be said. For a greater Pittsburgh region already in the worst 1% of places for cancers caused by air pollution, with up to triple the rate of youth asthma. The added toxic emissions from a growing petrochemical presence in our region threatens to seal our fate as one of the unhealthiest places to live in America. Adding insult to injury, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania provided $1.7 billion of tax abatements as an inducement for Shell to build the plant. It's easy to conclude that standing up for ourselves against the growing petrochemical presence here could be an impossible task. But the record of BC MAC in pushing back on fracking should give us hope. They've collected thousands of signatures on petitions. They have persuaded local residents at fairs and festivals and community forums about the dangers of air pollution. They've warned multiple municipal councils about fracking threats to their water supplies, with 2 actually adopting source water protection plans. They pressured the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection to be more proactive. And they've written letters to the editor in an effort to balance the barrage of misinformation from corporate, civic, and governmental interests who profit from what, in the end, is a threat to all of us. Following that same game plan, BC MAC has testified at hearings on air and water permits for the Shell plant, and they've organized outstanding Eyes on Shell programs, highlighting the plant's potential to negatively affect air, water, health, and safety for all of us living in the region. When fracking began here 18 years ago, it was promoted as a benign boon to our economy. We've learned over the years that fracking is anything but benign. Now the Shell plastic plant is being promoted in the same deceptive way, along with promises of good permanent jobs that simply don't materialize. If you want a graphic example of where we're headed, consider the following. Pittsburgh's population has declined from its peak in 1950 of 677,000 people. Today, 301,000 people live in Pittsburgh, a drop of 56% in 72 years. The future of our region depends upon our becoming a leader in addressing solutions to the problem of pollution and climate change, rather than investors in industries that make our bad situation even worse. While we have great universities, a growing high-tech sector, and major healthcare providers, all of whom could take us in a new and productive direction, they've allowed themselves to be intimidated into silence. But we don't have to be silent. We must speak out for the thousands whose deaths could have been prevented if we had addressed this crisis years ago. Today's town hall will give BC MAC residents a chance to express their concerns about the harm that's already being done to them, even before the plant is open. Just imagine what the future holds for them and for all of us once operations begin. If you're asking why you should do this and get involved and try to help them, it's simple. We're breathing the same air as the residents of Beaver County. And at the end of the formal presentation in about 45 minutes, stay tuned because it'll be your turn to weigh in. Thank you, and I turn it over to Andy from BC MAC.
Thank you, Howard, for that introduction, and hello to everyone this evening. I am a volunteer with the BC Marcellus Awareness Community, and particularly with the Eyes on Shell project that BC MAC has put together. It was initiated after the Preparing for Petrochemicals meeting that happened last December, and since then, since February, I should say, Eyes on Shell has been hosting monthly meetings with folks who are interested in getting a little more involved with regards to what's happening with the cracker plants. The numbers have grown steadily and consistently since then, including myself. And we are inviting everyone here this evening to join us in that growth as we observe, report, and work together to hold Shell accountable and inform our neighbors and communities. As we grow Eyes on Shell, as well as the BC Marcellus Awareness Community, we are working to support our watchdogs and our residents and neighbors with more ways to contact us. Right now, you can go ahead and email us, and I'm just going to drop that in the chat. We're also working towards launching a new phone line, a specialized reporting form, and we will be updating the Eyes on Shell website with more information in the coming days. If you're interested in joining us, which we hope you all are, we encourage you to email us at eyesonshell@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us via our website. We do have a mailing list that you are able to join. And if you have any particular questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or go ahead and ask them once we get to our question and answer period. We also want to encourage anybody who's interested in joining us for our next monthly meeting, which will be Wednesday, November 2nd, to go ahead and register via the link I just dropped in the chat. And I look forward to the engaging discussion and we are all going to have tonight. So thank you very much, Howard. I would like to go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Clifford Lau, who is one of our BCMAC members.
Hello, it's all good to see you all tonight. And I'm Dr. Clifford Lau, as Andy said, adjunct professor teaching chemistry and environmental science. And I have the responsibility or honor to try to give you guys a quick overview of what's been going on up at the cracker plant. As Andy said, our group is Eyes on Shell, and so that we've been having different incidences happening, and we're going to give you a quick overview. One of the first ones that happened in September of 2021, you might remember, was the maple syrup smell, and the DEP investigated it, and Shell was fined for malodor. This is an interesting little report done by our friends of Marcellus Drilling News, kind of making light of the maple syrup smell coming from a cracker plant. But we continue to monitor them. The next thing that happened in March was a sulfuric acid spill within their line, within their plant. That was investigated, cleaned up, and there was many reports determining what exactly tried to happen, what actually happened. The latest, incident that's continuing to go, as the Shell has been looked at for putting foam into the water. This is looking down into the Ohio River from, they're called outfall number 1. On the right, the large cooling towers there. So they've been, and along with Three River Waterkeeper, we've been collecting samples and doing water analysis and also checking on their activity there and investigating as far as what is taking place. And it continues as of September 27th. We had another report into the NRC for white liquid being dumped into the river. So this is an ongoing event. The latest, one of the things happening now that the Shell plant is starting up is Orange Sky event. The residents in Beaver County and even beyond have reported seeing a nice orange sky being reported on different nights and things. So we're investigating to see what takes place there. Here's one of the times I was on the river with Three Rivers Waterkeeper collecting samples. And from there, you get a good view of 2 of the ground flares that we call soup cans. And with the eyes, you could see, and maybe you can see right now, some brown gas or solid coming out of that ground flare. Except something, depending on the roster of your computer, it may not look that. So we zoom it up, maybe a little bit better. But we enhanced by increasing the yellow of the chromophore of the photograph. And you can definitely see from both ground flares that we call the soup cans, something coming out. And we think that that's partially responsible for the orange sky effect that we've been seeing on different various nights. And we're, along with Andy, trying to collect this data and look at its time frames, and in order to determine some kind of trend, to determine what weather conditions and whatever that lead to those ground flares. Here's one of our opportunities to monitor. This is a night that I was up there, and we have, I'll talk about shortly, looking at different kind of ways of taking air samples and measurements. We have instruments that we're looking at to get through Clean Air Council of called PID, photo ionization detectors that can detect VOCs and other gases. So part of the thing is I was up there that night, and you can see that the 2 soup cans were definitely putting out quite a bit of material. We have the flare to the right, also giving out steam. This one we call the emergency flare. For any other lack of a term, it's the one of the larger. But these are steam-assisted flares, and that's what you're seeing coming out at this time. So part of all these observations is to note weather conditions, look at the cloud cover, and as you all know in Allegheny County, that inversions report and see what's leading to the trapping of this pollution. And saying that the orange sky, this was done one of our Eyes on Shell or BC MAC in our group driving from Ohio, could even see the orange sky. And this is going, driving eastward at night. So it's quite a prominent phenomenon happening. And besides the orange sky, they're starting up now and starting flares. This is one of the first times that a person observed some dark material coming out of the flare. You can see there right over the top of the bridge. But since then, there's been several other events where the flare burning at night. This is the high pressure flare on what we call the emergency flare, they call it. And then during the daytime, we can see that there's been in September 18th and so that they've had several incidences where the black smoke has been given off. Shell has said that this was due to a fact that one of their compressors failed and they were just burning off hydrocarbon. But again, we're investigating this to see exactly what's going on here and whether or not this fits into Shell's flare minimization agreement that's been put together. So part of what we do at in the Eyes on Shell is doing episodic sampling, gathering samples, and one of the things we're currently doing, we have done, is collect air samples by this really sophisticated device here that may be familiar with the Louisiana bucket brigades, where it kind of started down in Cancer Alley. It's now, there's groups out in California, Colorado, New Jersey, and now we have here in Beaver County that we collect air samples, and the EPA will accept the results of these air samples as well as equal to that of a SUMA canister. And these buckets are a lot easier to use than SUMA canister. Here's a result about the analysis that we get back doing a TO15. So it gives you a wide variety of all different organics. that we can detect this way. Also, we're evaluating, these are the PIDs by different manufacturers to have a more instantaneous reading for what VOCs are being given off. And we're also looking at using colorimetric gas dispersion tubes that would detect certain materials that will be given off by the plant, such as benzene, butadiene, formaldehyde, and hydrocarbons, and give a relative amount of what those materials are. There are 8 points of emission in the Shell plant, so we have a lot to keep track of. These are their sort of technical names, and you'll see that to get the eyes on Shell people and our observers to be able to more conveniently tell us where they're seeing the activity at, we've given interesting names to each of these, are easier to remember. And besides these 8 points of emission, there are also thousands of fugitive points that they can have. And you've probably all have seen this document from their air permit, how many of the NOx and carbon monoxide and HAPs and VOCs that they're going to be emitting per year. So here's from work with by the help of Carnegie Mellon University, CMU, looking at the plant and identifying, as I mentioned before, the round ground flares. We like to call them the soup cans. We have the emergency flare, the one I showed you in one, and the small one down by the side is actually the spent caustic thermal vent, but it's easier just to say it's the West Pental flare, and then we have the East Pental flare, and the cracker things, we call those the Seven Sisters. And here we have on the other end, you'll see we have the stove top is for that one. We also have a breathe cam set up. So we have now that we've seen some black smoke coming out of the stove top. And just the other day on Friday, October 21st, there you might have seen that we had people were alarmed by having a high particle count. It turned out to be trouble with the DOE, but it also had some pretty large steam vents coming out of the cooling towers. And you can see here at the beginning of the day, the PM10 are quite high, and it was a glitch in the DOE or the DEP's measuring. And so my last photograph here is one we recently took of some aerial flight. This is looking toward the south, so this is looking for you guys in Allegheny County, and you can see that white or the green open area there. That's where the Falcon pipeline comes in to the lower portion there. So this is looking toward where all the frac gas comes from, which is passing through Allegheny County. So thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions later. Okay, gotta quit. Stop trying. There we go. All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Cliff. Really appreciate that. And such valuable images. And they keep pouring in too. It seems like never a dull moment over there. Okay, next up, I believe that we're going to have a little section on why you should care as a Pittsburgher and how to join Eyes on Shell, starting off with Nora Johnson.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks, Cliff, for those great images. They're really terrific. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here tonight. I'm Nora Johnson, BCMAC Board Secretary, and my job here is to explain why you should care about what's happening in Beaver County. But let me begin by telling you something about myself. I've lived in Pittsburgh since 1970 and in Squirrel Hill since 1971. And during that time, I've been engaged in environmental as well as other issues. Fast forward to the summer of 2017, when I was looking for hands-on involvement in a major environmental issue. So one July evening, I attended a presentation at my church, Sixth Presbyterian, on the corner of Forbes and Murray. Speaking were Terry Baumgartner, who is on the program tonight, Matt Mihalik of the Breathe Project, and Thaddeus Popovich of Allegheny County Clean Air Now and Franklin Park. And they were talking about the cracker plant. So I'd heard about the Shell ethane cracker plant being built way far away in Beaver County, somewhere where I didn't even know where that was. I had thought that building a giant plastic factory sounded like such a bad idea that I was sure my elected officials would, of course, nix that plan and that it would go away. But on that July evening at Sixth Church, I learned that no, the plan to produce 1.6 million metric tons of plastic out of ethane gas sourced from local frac wells was very much on, and that all those elected officials were gung-ho behind it. So I started going to BCMAC meetings and immediately began learning about the problems, the technology, the background, and the frustrations that go along with the introduction of a massive petrochemical polluter into a politically sidelined region. I found the more I learned about the petrochemical build out in our region, the more I care about it. The oil and gas industry, or the petrochemical industry, as we're calling it now, is moving into all our municipalities. And when you look at the Shell ethane cracker plant, you are looking at the destination point for the fracked natural gas coming from all over our region, which extends into Ohio and West Virginia, as well as a vast sweep of Pennsylvania, curving from the southwest corner up to the northeast corner of the state. This whole area is underlain by the Marcellus Shale play, a mile under the surface, as well as the Utica play, 2 miles down. There is a lot of natural gas under there, and the industry wants to get it all. We who live 25 miles away from the plant are already living with pretty bad air, not only from Clairton Coke Works emissions, but also from an array of point and non-point source pollution. And this situation is going to get worse once the Shell plant starts up. We all need to understand the issues so we can take them to our elected, our elected officials and into our regulatory agencies. So what are those issues? So issue 1 is health impacts. If you follow the natural gas as it moves from a well to the cracker plant, you will find pipelines, processing plants, compressor stations, cryogenic plants, and more. All of these disrupt the countryside and emit dangerous emissions. The Shell plant is going to exacerbate health outcomes all across our region, and you will hear more about this from Rachel Meyer in just a minute. Issue 2, the Shell plant is going to exacerbate climate change. It will emit at least 2.3 million tons per year of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Climate change in our region, look for increased precipitation, leading to more flooding and landslides. Look for earthquakes as more frac wells are drilled to feed the Shell plant, and more frac wastewater is injected into the earth in a vain attempt to get rid of highly toxic and radioactive wastes. Issue 3. You have heard supporters of the petrochemical build-out claim that many jobs are and will be created through this industry, and that economic vitality is right around the corner. We dispute this claim, and I will say more about this in a while. Although fracking is not allowed within Pittsburgh city limits, municipalities all around us are dealing with one or more petrochemical encroachments. To give you an idea of what's happening in a few of these communities, let me mention Penn Township in Westmoreland County, right across the border from us. There, activists are fighting like tigers to halt new frac wells and frac waste injection wells from going in. They're worried about their groundwater as well as air quality, and we should be too, since the waste injection well sites are way too close to the Allegheny River, where many of us get our drinking water. Moving from Pittsburgh's northeast corner to its western side, A fracking company wants to drain water from Big Sewickley Creek to use in frack wells. Big Sewickley Creek is a shallow, rocky waterway, which is home to an endangered species of fish and a lot of other wildlife. 12 municipalities all along Big Sewickley Creek use it for recreation and are steadfast in their opposition to this destructive misuse of a public resource. And to our south is Washington County, the most fracked county in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Department of Health and the University of Pittsburgh are investigating evidence of the rare childhood cancer Ewing sarcoma, which kills young people in their teens and early 20s. Density of oil and gas structures and their proximity to homes, schools, hospitals, and workplace is a very important factor in lessening health impacts. We are supporting Clean Air Council in its campaign for mandatory statewide setbacks to protect the places where people are. Please see the link in the chat with information about how you can get involved in Clean Air Council's campaign. I can't conclude my comments without letting you know that an important part of our work is to talk to our elected officials and to candidates running for public office and to regulators such as the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection and the Environmental Protection Agency, and to Shell itself. Through our Eyes on Shell meetings, which you have heard about from Andy, we give our participants information and resources to get in touch with these community leaders. We invite you to join us for an Eyes on Shell meeting, and our next one takes place on November 2nd. A registration form is in the chat, and we'd be glad to see you on the Zoom screen. Thanks for your attention. Rachel, I believe you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to give some more information, a bit of a brief overview of the health effects of having a petrochemical facility like Shell's ethane cracker plant here in our region. I personally started volunteering with BCMAC in 2018, and I started working with Moms Clean Air Force this spring. Moms as a nonprofit is to protect kids from air pollution and climate change. And they specifically brought on another person to this region in part because of the cracker plant. I moved to Beaver County 5 years ago. At that time, I started to see the beautiful wooded hillsides around me being stripped and torn up for pipelines, and found fracking wells and a compressor station. I had wondered why my asthma was flaring up. Now I had a pretty good idea. Pollutants from fracking can cause respiratory diseases, asthma attacks, adverse birth outcomes, blood disorders, neurological problems, and cancer. Dozens of children and young adults in fracking areas in southwestern Pennsylvania have been afflicted by Ewing sarcoma, a rare childhood bone cancer. Researchers from Yale found an elevated risk of leukemia among children in Pennsylvania living up to 10 kilometers from a fracking well. Fracking is also a big contributor to climate change, as methane is leaked from every step of the process. Add these climate warming gases to the 2.2 million tons a year of carbon dioxide from the cracker plant itself. The cracker plant will require a lot more fracking, 1,000 new wells every 3 to 5 years. And of course, the plant itself is bringing more pollution. Emissions from Shell's ethane cracker plant will impact local communities and travel up the river valley into Pittsburgh, worsening ground level ozone and particulate matter, or PM 2.5 levels, exacerbating respiratory and cardiovascular conditions. PM 2.5 is microscopic. It can penetrate your lungs and pass into your bloodstream. Children and the elderly are especially vulnerable. The cracker plant will be the largest emitter of volatile organic compounds in southwestern Pennsylvania. VOCs, along with other hazardous air pollutants from the plant, can cause eye, nose, and throat irritation, frequent headaches, and nausea. They can also damage the liver, kidney, and central nervous system, worsen symptoms of asthma, and cause many types of cancer. Children living near petrochemical facilities specifically have an elevated risk of leukemia. We can look to other areas in the US to see how the petrochemical industry has impacted communities. Cancer Alley is the 85-mile stretch of the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, packed with over 150 petrochemical plants and refineries. The cancer rate along this chemical corridor is nearly 50 times the national average. Then there is the plastic. The cracker plant has the capability of producing over 1 million metric tons of plastic a year. Only around 8% of plastic is actually recycled. Estimates vary, but it's around that amount. It's very little. Plastic does not decompose and keeps emitting greenhouse gases even after it becomes microplastic in landfills, agricultural soils, and oceans. Now the plastic industry is pushing to make incinerating plastic the solution, taking the pollution from our landfills and oceans and putting it into the air we breathe. So cracker plants, unlike what Shell will want you to believe, make bad neighbors. For the whole region affected by their toxic pollution, and for the entire planet further warmed by their greenhouse gas emissions and polluted by plastic. And with that, I think I'm turning it back over to Andy.
I think we may actually be going to Bob Schmetzer for just a moment. Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself, Bob, and take it away.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Bob Schmetzer, chairman of BC MAC. And the question is, why join Eyes on Shell? We all have a common and sympathetic interest for the prevention, protection, and enforcement of our laws. And there'll be a Title V hearing coming up pretty soon, so stay tuned, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that for the plant to get a permit to operate. Our objective is to help all elected, appointed officials and the public become aware of our constitutional rights under the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 1, Section 27. And its purpose is to do no harm. Crossing a fence line with pollution is criminal trespass. And united, we'll stand and improve our air, land, water, health, property values, and quality of life. This election, vote like your life depends on it, because it does. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. And now we're going to move on to Terry Baumgardner.
Hi, everybody. My name's Terry Baumgardner, and I have volunteered with BC MAC for over a decade now. I am also Clean Air Council's outreach coordinator for Beaver County. And I'm going to just briefly frame what you're going to see in a minute. This is a video, very short video that was part of the Sierra Club's Fall 22 magazine. And it was part of an article called Titans of Plastic. If you haven't read it, I hope there's going to be a link in the chat. And I hope you will read it because it's a great overview of things, well, the connections between the cracker, fracking, all the fracking infrastructure throughout the region, and Allegheny County included. And the video features Bob Schmetzer, myself, and especially Mayor Dwan Walker, who's the mayor of Aliquippa, and I live in Aliquippa. Mayor Walker is talking in the video about the unkept promises of jobs that Shell presented us with. At any rate, it's a 7-page article. The video has been, a lot of people have remarked on Mayor Walker's role in that video, so we'll let that roll now. Thank you.
They're going to be making the nurdles, little balls of plastic. They could send that out to manufacturers. They could heat that up and blow it into molds and make all kinds of different plastics. Shell came through with a narrative that they are going to create all these jobs, and it would be the return of the steel industry. That didn't transpire because the thousands of jobs that happened here were temporary workers.
Anybody that comes to step foot on this ground, your family, that you can live and work and play here. We gave birth to unions. We gave birth to the steel industry. We were told that there were going to be jobs, and a lot of jobs, for people to come out of high school and to trade, and go into this workforce and make a career. I don't see that. I see cars from California, Arizona, Panhandle. They said, oh, 10,000 gonna build it, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 gonna work in it. Now, all of a sudden, we're hearing it's only gonna be 600. Now, the economics you had are no longer there. You say you're a good neighbor, and that's been your mantra the whole time. Tell me everything. Leave nothing to chance.
This plant has the potential to emit 516 tons per year of volatile organic compounds, also called VOCs. And they are deadly for everyone because they combine with nitrogen oxides and sunlight to form ozone. It's invisible. This is not the black soot on your doorstop that people complained about years ago. It's something you cannot see.
Shell cracker plant isn't even open yet. First problem they had was a gas that came out of the electric high voltage transformers. Second problem, Vanport and Beaver, they were reporting a maple syrup smell, and Shell was mixing different chemicals to clean out some of the pipes. They still haven't given us an MSDS sheet on that yet.
It is big, it's huge, it's mammoth, it's a behemoth, and it is connected. It's got all these tentacles that spread out over the region.
Are we doing everything that we can to make sure that it's safe? You hear different, oh, this is safe, but then you hear something about the water being off. Then you had a house blow up because they was running lines in Center Township.
We have a thing called air inversions. Air is warmer up here than down below. It holds everything in, and we're like in this tunnel. You're gonna have those 7 smokestacks venting out, that if we have an air inversion that lasts more than a day, we're gonna have a lot of sick people.
They came in with the expectation of bringing jobs. They came in with the expectation of being diverse. They came in with the expectation of changing the environment, to be in transparency. Okay, well, Aliquippa needs to see that. And we do, because it's not just their future at stake, it's our future at stake.
We have economic alternatives. We need our leaders to have enough imagination to embrace those alternatives and go for them big time, because our time is running out.
So we're going to return now to that claim that many jobs are and will be created through the petrochemical industry, and that economic vitality is right around the corner. We dispute this claim. So the first point is, as you have heard from Mayor Walker, these claims of prosperity are false. Some great research has been done by the Ohio River Valley Institute, and I would like to call your attention to a compelling report titled Misplaced Faith: How Policymakers' Belief in Natural Gas is Driving Rural Pennsylvania into an Economic Dead End. The title gives you a good overview of the piece, and I believe a link is in the chat for you to see their evidence. The second point is the taxpayer burden. So all of us taxpayers are forking over $1.65 billion to create at most, and I'm pretty clear that this is at most, 400 jobs at $2.7 million per job. Please keep that number in mind, $2.7 million per job. So every single job at the Shell plant is a publicly funded job. We are making plastic with money that could hire firefighters, teachers, and healthcare workers, as well as create sustainable jobs. And contrast this with New York State's commitment of $1.5 billion for 40,000 renewable energy jobs in the state, or a subsidy of only $37,500 per job, a tiny fraction. And the third point is that we can create a new sustainable economy. For example, Reimagine Beaver County is an initiative that sprang from BC-MAC in 2017. From the visioning of community members, Reimagine Beaver County developed a report that has inspired a green economy task force engaged in bringing green industries to Beaver County. And I believe we're also putting a link to that report in the chat. We are not bound forever to depend on a fossil fuel-based economy. Using our resources, we can build a sustainable economy. Thanks.
Super. Thank you so much, Nora. And thank you to all the speakers for their thoughtful presentations this evening. I'm just going to, there we go. Now we're going to move on into open discussion and question and answer period that will be moderated by Howard. And so I would definitely, if you have questions for any of the speakers tonight, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we will be moving through them in this Q&A forum. Thanks. Go ahead, Howard.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you for our presenters. Well, it's been a privilege to get to know several of the people from BC MAC during this period of time, and it really does give us hope for the impact that we can make as individuals, and with some real focus to trying to create a different future for our region. So it's your time. Any questions you have, any comments, any thoughts for individual presenters, be glad to hear from you.
While we're waiting, I don't know if Howard or Mayor Walker or others have any follow-up comments, things that you were inspired by during the course of tonight's event, things that maybe were not said, but you thought of it as you were reviewing what other people were saying.
I think it would be great to hear from Mayor Walker. First of all, we really thank you for joining us. I'm so glad to get to meet you, at least virtually. I've seen you in that presentation before, in that video before, but if there's anything you would choose to add, and particularly as an elected official with the responsibility for progress in your region and your community, and protecting the residents.
I mean, again, the accountability level. Again, I'm Mayor Walker from Aliquippa. I'm a 3-term mayor. I've been the mayor of Aliquippa since 2012. Thank you for having me, Ms. Terry. Thank you for the invite. Thank you, Mr. Howard, and all the people involved. No, it's our responsibility to. I have a granddaughter now, so I'm planting seeds for the shade I'm not going to sit into the shade of. I'm planting a lot of trees that I will never see grow. And then what we're going to leave behind for our youth and our kids that are coming after us is the most important thing that we're talking about right now. So, I mean, men and women lie, but numbers don't lie. I mean, you can see the numbers and they stick out like a sore thumb. So anybody that sees these numbers and don't question themselves and the resolve about it, I mean, I don't know. Ms. Nora, your information is priceless. I mean, just enough information that you gave just now, it's just, about the health impact, climate change, 2.3 million tons of CO2 in the air. You mentioned 3 schools, but you didn't mention Aliquippa. And you didn't mention, how far we're 5.6 miles away along the Ohio River from the cracker plant itself. So maybe Aliquippa should be implemented into that process, because, you're not the only ones. I mean, remember, when the potential came through, Aliquippa was one of the potential sites before we brownfield and before we actually cleaned up our brownfield, our 7.2 miles of old steel mill. So keep in mind that, don't lose sight of that. And then there's the potential sites for the bounce back as far as jobs coming, because again, the promise was made that there would be thousands of jobs. I attended those meetings, and you kind of leery whenever they say don't record anything and don't ask any questions. And then when you see Miss Terry come through at the Aliquippa High School asking questions, and they immediately shut it down and stop the questions from being asked, that kind of bothers, because one, I'm an information person. I like to see things. I like to engage on a personal level. If you tell me something, I'm going to find out what you're talking about, and I'm going to research what you're talking about, and try to understand the processes. The good news is some people will say the cracker plant's here, but the bad news is, guess what? The cracker plant's here. So what do we do now moving forward to make sure we have access to the information that's for our residents and for our people? Me as mayor, I need that information. I can talk all I want to. I'm 6'1", 300 pounds, can't run fast, can't hide. But if you give me information and I can disseminate to my residents, disseminate to my audience that, hey, this is what why your kids have thyroid issues, why your kids have issues with growing or cancer or behavioral, those all can be interconnected. So if that information is out there, then any information needs to be disseminated back to us so we can, validate our own health risk, because it did something, and whoever's at the wheel of the car ain't driving it right. So we probably need to understand, I need to understand what's the best possible way for my residents to be safe. And if there is none, then how are so-called community members saying they're gonna keep us safe? the commissioners all heralded this was going to be the biggest boom since steel industry. No, listen, there's people in bars sitting right now waiting for the steel industry to come back, and guess what? It's not coming back. You got people in bars right now hoping the steel mill is going to come back sometime in the near future. It's not going to be the case. But we need to understand something, that what is right now and what is right now is our future. Again, we are planting seeds for trees that we will never see the shade of. And if we are, then those roots need to be deep rooted in transparency, accountability, love, passion, understanding, communications. All those things need to be mixed and put in together for this thing, for it to work. Because again, there's no transparency in what they promised. And that's one thing. If you, I don't care who you are, if you think there's no transparency in what they've been doing, you can ask the question. If you're still waiting for a report, as Bob said, you're still waiting for a report and you haven't gotten it yet. Come on, man. That's what you promised in the beginning, to be as transparent as you possibly can. So it is up to the elected officials of Potter. It is up to the elected officials of commissioners. It is up to us to force their hand about being more transparent, more accountable. I agree with that. You know, I agree with that 100%, but we need to understand something. If we're sitting here and putting baby in a corner, again, that's what they want us to do. They want y'all to come and act irate. They want you to be disrespectful so they can shut meetings down so you never get your questions answered. Slow this thing down. This is a marathon. They know this. The clocks keep ticking. We all get older. Age just changes us. So we know, if we know it's more of attrition, it's just a marathon, slow it down a little bit. Because guess what? Look, they're not expecting us. They're expecting us to outlast us all. Remember that. The constant force to outlast us all. So if that's the case, then we need to be training up people behind us to take the torch further than we could ever take it. And be aware of those changes that are coming and what that transparency looks like. Because good, you got a cell phone in your hand, but we can be one of the smartest dumb generations that ever lived. Right now, we can be the most smartest dumb generation that ever lived because we got all this information in our hands, but yet we don't use it for the right reasons. And that's what scares me. I'm 47 years old. I remember my dad walking in that mill and all that orange soot all over the cars and all that stuff. And then here, years later, these same people coming up with COPD and lung issues and cancer and all kinds of things. So again, yeah, they used to say that orange smoke that means that was money being made, but it cost you your health. And if you're telling me if that doesn't cost you your health, then what are we talking about, man? I mean, look at this thing from a bird's eye view. We all see this stuff, man. Look, there's one thing about me is this, man. You can say a lot of things, call me late for dinner, fat, whatever you want to call me, but you're not going to call me somebody who stood in the corner and let something happen. You're not going to say that. You're not going to stand in the corner and let me sit idly by and not ask the questions that I want answers to and tell me to be quiet and say, oh, not at this moment, we'll get back to you. Well, what's get back to me? A month from now, 3 months from now? Because my city had the largest Utica shell on top of Franklin Avenue. Underneath, 10 miles down, right there. And they send pipes from Ambridge to get that gas and suck it out. So just think about this. They let you in the room to see the information happening, but then they closed the Pandora's box and said, okay, we don't owe you anything. We're not gonna. So what happens if you had earthquakes as close to almost what? In Ohio, you had earthquakes. If my city's sitting on 200-year-old pipes, you already see what happens when we lose water here. So I just need to understand, what transparency, you got to reevaluate the transparency conversation to me. You got to reevaluate the conversation of diversity, what it looks like to me. You got to reevaluate the health issue and impact, not just on Rochester, Beaver, and Center Township. I'm talking about Aliquippa, I'm talking Hopewell, I'm talking everybody along that Howell River. That again, don't shortchange yourself in your evaluations of schools, because we're in the valley too. And we're along that riverfront. And that needs to be talked about. And Ms. Rachel, I appreciate you and everything that you talked about, because it means a lot to me. I took a lot of notes, just trying to make sure I have some questions I need answered, because it's important for me to get those answers I need.
Yeah, I would just interject. First of all, thank you for what you do and for your passion and for obviously your commitment to trying to do the best job you possibly can do for your constituents and beyond. The double frustration here is, we have a company like Shell, you have a company like U.S. Steel, we have other polluters who don't commit to transparency and don't answer questions. But we also have healthcare providers like UPMC and Allegheny Health Network who won't even engage in this discussion. because for whatever reason, they've been intimidated because they get funding, because they have leadership from those companies that sit on their boards. And that's part of the problem here. And I totally agree with the notion that this is all about perseverance. You know, I don't want to hold these town halls up as the solution. But one thing that we did commit to is that we will maintain an effort. You know, we've had 8 of these, so we're not giving up. We need to find a way to build the constituency that can confront some of these other decision makers who, if they had their way, if they did what was right for their own organizations, how could it be wrong for a healthcare provider to talk about illness and what we could do to prevent it? And that's part of the problem we face. So obviously, it's going to take a tremendous amount of commitment to continue to push in those directions. So are there questions? I see Thaddeus, you have your hand up.
And there are lots of questions
yes,
that have come through the chat, Howard. Just look at your private chat and you'll see the pile of questions that are coming in. Thanks.
Okay.
Go, Thaddeus.
Do you want me to say something?
Well, you have your hand up. You might as well. And
Okay.
we'll look at.
I thought I'd get in quickly. And Mayor Walker, I loved your comments. You may or may not remember me when Pastor Judith Moore put on a racial justice forum.
Yes, right.
And okay, and we talked about you growing up in Aliquippa, where some of my family came from. And at that time, you said you dare not go into West Aliquippa at the time. and shame on my relatives for being intimidators. But anyway, I like what you had to say, and I also liked. Aliquippa seems to get left out in a lot of these discussions, and it should. It used to be the prime employer in Beaver County. I had 2 uncles who worked there. Okay, one on the hot mill section, one hot end section, and one on the pipe section. They died horrible deaths, though, because they weren't concerned about pollution, and that's my concern for the Shell facility. And the other thing is climate. I don't really have a question, but I like the idea that we talked about climate. I think about the recent hurricane that went through Florida and all the issues that they had. And you bet that a Shell facility will contribute to even worse hurricanes after that. Okay. So again, good to see you again, Mayor Walker. I love it. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
And Nancy Bernstein, Nancy, you posted in the chat, you know, what can we possibly do to support the mayor and beyond? So do you want to speak to that directly, and then maybe Mayor Walker can respond?
Yeah, I mean, I was just, listening to your, frustration. I'm just curious, like, is there any way we can help you and what you're trying to do?
Well, it's probably me being a voice for you. I think that's probably the strongest thing that I could do sitting at my level, because I think, again, they get, so just so you all know, they get their DCED money, CDBG money from our demise. So you get your grants. Every grant that's ever written in Beaver County comes from 3 locations: Aliquippa, Beaver Falls, and Midland. But those funds only trickle out to 16 municipalities. So you got to remember, it's like everybody becomes their mascot when it comes to money, when it comes to resources. You got a Hopewell Viking, you got a Beaver Bobcat, and Aliquippa Quip. We all become our mascot when it comes to allocating money and going after funds and advocating for our communities and making sure we have what we need. You gave Senate, if you get money, if you're close to the plant, you got a hospital, you got $67 million for the water plant, but then they forget about the ones that are outlining less than 2 miles down the road. There's no resources been given to us. I can't put my finger on, except for the Salvation Army, that the Shell has given anything, any residual money or anything to be good neighbors, to help support, our plight and to revitalize and I say a renaissance of Aliquippa. There's been no money. There's been no resources given to us, but yet they had meetings to tell us that this was going to be this pie in the sky about. And then guess what? Those conversations you have, all of a sudden, the person you talk to now is no longer with the company. So now you're backtracking and trying to explain your whole story again. Then by the time that guy's ears open, he or she ears open, another person moves in and you lost that story. I think the story got to keep being told. I think it has to keep resonating with people. We have to keep getting out there to make sure they understand, hey, we're not again, this is a war of attrition, Miss Nancy, and they're expecting us to quit, and they're expecting things, the clock to tick on us, and they keep thinking that we're going to step aside, and they keep thinking we're going to bow down, but that's not the case. We got to be more resilient than we ever have been, especially in this day and age. I think this is important that they know, and our commissioners need to know. Attend meetings and let them know, hey, you see the readings, you see the numbers, and if they don't want to talk about it, send them letters to it. But you have to understand this is a war. This is a marathon. It's definitely a marathon, but it's a war for the future of our generation. It's a war for our future babies. Like I said, my granddaughter is 5 months old. You know what I mean? Amia is her name, and I'm a grandfather, and it was important for my children, but now it's important for my grandchildren. And I want them to have an Aliquippa or Beaver County they can be proud of. That is built on transparency and accountability. That we do love our neighbors as we should love ourselves. I believe that, but we cannot do that without transparency. We can't do that without knowledge. We can't do that about togetherness. We can't come together on these things that matter to our families. And they'll divide and conquer us like they always have been. That's been the MO of Beaver County. They divide and conquer, and then they come in and they find those pockets that say yes, and they deal with them. Again, so many promises that were made, you have to say, oh, take the chance, okay, should we or shouldn't we? But then ask the questions of why. That's the question that's not, ask those questions of why, Ms. Nancy. No, to support, you tell me what you need me to do. Let me go to the commissioners. Let me go to CDBG. Let me go to DCED. Let me go and speak and say, hey, this is what the concerns of not just Aliquippa, but Beaver County. This is the concerns of people that live, work, and play here, that want to live and raise their families here. Most people never leave Beaver County. They already set up roots and they leave and they come back. And that's the key, because they know they can settle down, that they know the neighbor next door has got generations behind them. But that's the issue. Like I would love to know how I can help to further this process, because I think it's important that you do have more elected officials in the room, in those spaces where conversations are being made to make an influence, to bring information back to the residents that you normally couldn't get on your own. So if I can help in any way, I would like to be a conduit for that.
Great.
I got a comment in the chat asking, maybe the BC Mac folks, maybe Cliff, some of you can respond to this. Is it true that the emissions from flaring at the cracker plant is not factored into Shell's air permit limits because it's a safety procedure? And what's going on with this kind of flaring before the plant's even in operation? So I don't know if any of you can feel that.
Yeah, Howard, I can answer that. Yeah, no, the emission levels do take in the flaring. Shell says they're pretty high efficiency, so not much is going to get out, but it's still part of it. In particular, well, there's the carbon dioxide stuff that they burn off. And what they're doing, even though they're not in full operation right now, they're getting all the different systems work before they fully go. So they have to test out all the parts. So part of that testing involves using the flares to make sure that they're set up properly and stuff to take care of the emissions when they are fully operational.
And another question, maybe for Andy, since you're kind of new to the area, anything that can be done for us to help you? And then I see Nora's got her hand up.
To help Eyes on Shell, is that the question that we're?
Well, just in general, yes, if that's the place where we can make the biggest difference.
Yeah. So I think that, as neighbors and as community members, us coming together is really what we need at this point. There are specific ways that people, if they're interested in doing some volunteer work with BCMAC and Eyes on Shell, please go ahead and reach out to eyesonshell@gmail.com, and I'm happy to get involved. But to sort of echo Mayor Walker's thoughts and statement is that we work best when we work together. And so I think that as we come together as residents of Beaver County, as residents of Allegheny County, understanding how we can do that and how we can make sure that we're not protecting just ourselves, but our neighbors and our family members, that is what we're looking really to do tonight. And as we move forward in engaging people so that we can, we're not alone. You know, there's a lot of people on this call right now. There's a lot of people that have taken the time to get together tonight and chat and listen and engage. And that's what we want to continue to see happening. So please do not feel like any question is not a good question, or if you're not sure what you can do, just reach out. We're happy to talk to you. We're happy to get involved, and we look forward to you know, getting to know people as we continue through growing Eyes on Shell and getting those watchdogs. If you drive by the cracker plant and see something that you don't think is right, please just go ahead and let us know. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. And I would just say from my personal experience, since I engaged quite a bit with all of you during the planning for this, as a group of volunteers, you clearly are stretched to the limit. So I think anything that we can do, I've actually had somebody who's part of these calls, usually it just happens to be out of the country right now, indicate that he wants to get involved and he wants to be helpful. So the more of us that can do that, whatever it is that needs to be done, we can kind of broaden that reach and amplify your voice. So just an order of hands I saw, I see Nora, then Terry, Bob, and then Peter. You're muted, Nora.
Sorry. Just wanted to respond to Mayor Walker. Yes, we do need help. And yes, we would love to come and ask for your help. And I think we probably will. Thank you very much for offering it.
Terry, and then I also see Chris after that group. So Terry, Bob, Peter, Mark, and then Chris.
Yeah, I would just second what people have been saying about we need a broad base of people coming together in the region, not just Beaver County, but this is the region that is being impacted. And if we can gather and collect ourselves as a broad base of people in the region, we can make a difference. BCMAC, with the support of Clean Air Council, is also put forward to the Shell leadership a to-do list. And that list is a list of 6 broad categories of items, 3 or 4 in each category, that Shell should be doing as a, quote, good neighbor that they have proclaimed themselves to be, over and above what is legally required. And it includes communities, being sure the communities are prepared for an emergency, notifying communities in real time of incidents, and that hasn't been done consistently and well so far. Using the best available technology for leak detection, respecting our shared night sky, because some of the most numerous complaints we've had have been about light pollution, addressing the plastic crisis and the climate crisis. And if you're interested in joining Eyes on Shell and being part of the push for that to-do list, that would be a step. Also, just I want to say that our regional, our Beaver County leadership has tended to look backwards and not forward. And we do have alternatives that we need to pursue. And I hope folks can get on board with that. We also, I think, are looking ahead to Shell's and the whole industry's attempt to do something in the future, like do things with blue hydrogen and carbon capture and storage that will happen very fast, and there'll be a big push for them without people really understanding what's involved. And we all need to be together in understanding what that might mean. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Bob.
I think part of this whole problem is that the fracking is being somewhat ignored, because the cracker plant cannot operate without fracking. And I'm reading this article from State Impact, written by Reed Frazier. State Senator Cameron Bartolotta urged the Pennsylvania Health Department to drop out of a fracking public health forum, her letter showed. A week before the Department of Health and the University of Pittsburgh dropped out of the forum on a pair of public health studies focused on fracking, local state legislators sent a letter to the health department urging the department not to attend. That is troubling. We got to have open conversations across this state. You can't have politicians interfering with public studies. This is just outrageous. You know, that is the whole basis of America, to be able to talk freely and to be able to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our communities. So I'm really disturbed by that article, you know, from State Impact. And that's why I was saying earlier, vote as if your life depends on it, because it does.
Thank you, Bob. Peter?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. No, Evelyn, I'm up here. I'm just writing a note in the chat, which I'm about to send, but basically I've been trying to sort of view things and learn to take pictures, figure out where I can take pictures at Shell, figure out what to do. I've been yelled at once, to which I responded, you know, about taking pictures on the public street, to which I tried to yell back, I am a citizen of Beaver County, and find better places to do it. And I'm also listening. I'm trying to listen to sounds at night, maybe a little bit the way the old steel makers were able to listen to the quality of the steel by the kind of sound it made. They could figure out how the factory was working. I'll never get that facility, but I might be able to filter out the sounds, the sort of the dull, the slight but steady roar that I hear in front of my house at many times of the day from the other traffic sounds, and get a sense of what Shell is sonically as well as eyes. So it's eyes, ears, and I guess nose on Shell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I commend so many who've been involved in trying to monitor, putting up monitors in the area. Mark Dixon's been deeply involved with that. You know, one thing I can say is that I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but you know, there is a significant infrastructure here. Yeah, there's a perfect example of the number of monitors that have gone up. So the data can be provided. The question is, where does data go? The question is, do people respond to data? But you know, this is a very sophisticated region in terms of the capacity to do these things. Question is, can we create as much of a sophistication of will to be able to take this information and really use it as a lever, not just against elected officials and not just against companies that pollute, but against universities and healthcare providers who know what this is. They know the danger, and yet, yeah, talk about withdrawing from community forums where research would be presented. Pretty drastic. Mark, you had your hand up, and then Chris.
There we go. Yeah, got to unmute myself. Thanks there very much, Howard. I'm glad that you were able to mention the monitors. I think that's a place where a lot of people have gotten involved. Cliff is doing a lot of the spearheading of the upcoming monitor deployments, and also all kinds of different types of monitoring, not just little low-cost air monitors, but all the things that he mentioned in his presentation, like the buckets and then all these other different types, depending on what kinds of things we're measuring. So that's one area to get involved. One reflection that I had is that if I could imagine, if I was sitting and watching all this and hearing all the different potential ways to get involved and all the potential different issues, I might find myself in a state of overwhelm. And for anybody who's maybe feeling a little bit of overwhelm about, like, oh, there's just so much to do and I just don't know what to do about any of it, and so maybe I just won't do anything, I would just encourage you, go to, I think the best next step is to go to the next Eyes on Shell meeting on November 2nd. And that'll give you another chance to kind of percolate on these issues. You'll begin to hear the things popped up more often than other things for you, and things might come to your attention personally that might draw you in. You might find that you're a little more interested in this, or you're a little more interested in that, at which point you can reach out to the BCMAC email address. It's eyesonshell@gmail.com, right, Andy? And there you can have a conversation with Andy or whoever is on that address at that time to figure out, like, how do you fit in best into this movement, and what are the things that might be really intuitive for you, or what's confusing for you. So I think that there are a lot of really straightforward, simple ways to like make a next step. And I just wanted to highlight those. The other thing I wanted to highlight was that there were a lot of things mentioned about climate change and about how this can affect air quality. But I think that there are a couple other little things that are at stake here regionally, especially for people who maybe live in Allegheny County and maybe are not in the direct airflow of Shell, the immediate airflow. I've just recently seen that Shell was courting a number of different students. I think it was from CMU. I certainly know that they have been recruiting students from CMU. I think also Pitt as well. And so we have this industrial presence here that is trying to sort of grab the cream of the crop of the student body and bring them into a petrochemical livelihood. And that's something that will have implications for the culture of our region. It will impact the majors that are chosen. It will impact the things that people think that they can do to make a living into the future. And if people are set upon making a living off of petrochemicals because they were enticed by Shell during their student years, they may be more inclined to go to bat for petrochemicals in 10 or 15 years when they realize, oh, climate change is worse than they thought, but my livelihood is dependent on this industry, and they might feel betrayed from the community that they were sold a bill of goods, because why have they devoted their life to petrochemicals when it was a dead-end job for them in a climate-constrained world? So I think that there are student implications for students all the way down in the Pittsburgh area that are impacted by whether or not Shell thrives here. The other, I think there was some mention of the trains. I think Bob had mentioned in the chat, but there's a big push that the RP3 group that Glenn Oakhurst, who's also on this call, has been working very closely. Well, he's been basically moving that group along with some really powerful work that is looking at the intention of regional government and industry to create double stack train rail lines all throughout the region, so that they can put two trains, double stack the cars on a train and carry twice as much stuff potentially, or at least have twice as much volume. And if there's one thing that they need to move plastic around, it's a lot of volume. It's very light and high volume, but these trains bring a lot of air pollution into this region. Everywhere that a train goes, they're going to bring diesel pollution, and really a nasty kind of diesel pollution, into that region. And so if you think that all this plastic is just going to be manufactured up in Beaver and you're not going to see any of that pollution, think again. And there are people working on things like that already in this group. And so there's many, just a multitude of ways to get involved. And then the last thing I'll mention is that whenever you have a juggernaut, you can imagine the juggernaut of U.S. Steel in the region. Historically, they still have outsized power in the political realm of our region from power they wielded 50, 100 years ago. When a multi-billion-dollar company like Shell comes and asks permission from a handful of Potter Township supervisors in a very, very tiny township, there's a power differential at play there. A multi-billion-dollar corporation and a very, very tiny township, maybe 500 people in that township. And it's very difficult to run a democracy well in the context of that power differential. I'll leave it at that. But it's really important that we kind of double down on our efforts to address all these things regionally, not just think that it's just going to be resolved out there far away in Beaver County. Thanks all. Howard, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to call on Chris, and then I just have a few comments that kind of relate to some of the things that have been said and some of the things we might be able to do to close it off. So Chris.
Hi guys, this is Chris DeGiulio, also known as PK. I've worked with several people here, and I wanted to just let a lot of folks know that are watching, I agree with Mark saying it's very overwhelming. I've been through the same thing in Southeastern Pennsylvania, dealing with petrochemical here. And, you know, this group has done such an amazing job at understanding what the community needs and actually focusing on that. I am an analytical chemist, so I work Dr. Lyles of my heart. I love seeing the scientists in there. And when we work within that compartment of understanding when it's science, we stick to the science and be able to understand how to use it. So then the physicians and whatnot, when they do the research, have the data. So we're sitting here talking about like, so what I want to say is I love the regional aspect. You're absolutely right on this. And this is so important. Why am I here? Because I'm dealing with something that's coming from over in your neck of the woods. And eventually CCUS or carbon capture is going to come from us over to you to sequester and to be reutilized. So it's very important to connect the system. And so I have a duty for my people to help and watch what you guys have established. And I want to recreate it out here. I love everything you're doing. I want everybody to understand that this is about community foundation. People are being empowered and learning how to look up, and you have scientists and professionals teaching you how to take care of yourself, essentially, and empowering community to know what to look for, the questions to ask, which have been left out of this whole equation. And they just come barreling through. And this is an amazing, like, game-changing aspect. Watchdogging works. Because if nobody else is going to do it, it is our job to do it. I'm not begging any oppressor anymore. We'll do it. And that is the next system that we, you know, employ in our next, in the government we decide to change. So I'm very proud of you guys being here. And so the question I have actually for you guys is, how do you see the connections between even Southeastern, Northeastern, or Pennsylvania? How do you see that to be effective in your fight? How I help you, for example, how do you see that to be helpful to you?
Yeah, I'm going to take the risk of calling on Matt to just see if you have some thoughts on that. I know you just came back from a conference. You've been in this work for a long time, not just from the Breathe Project, but in a variety of ways. So Matt Mihalik is the director of the Breathe Project. So maybe you want to speak to that.
Thanks. And pardon my brain as it, kind of processes all of this and tries to catch up with you all. You've done a wonderful program. It's really wonderful to see all that you've done and communicated. And PK, your question is fantastic, because the connections are statewide and national and international. I don't want to say this in a way that makes it even more overwhelming, but one of the things that I just spent the past couple days at a Break Free from Plastics National Summit, and I made contacts with people in Texas and Louisiana and California and Maine and the upper Midwest and so on. And the issues that we're dealing with are issues that other people are dealing with. And many of those people have been dealing with it for longer than we have. And there are also things that we're dealing with that they haven't seen or heard of before. And so the connections are really vital and important, because it allows us to up our game when it comes to this. So with PK, one thing that's clear is Philadelphia wants to revive its port to be an export terminal. Okay, so things that happen here get connected to international commodity markets by way of pipelines that span our entire state and connect to the Port of Philadelphia and the elected officials there who want to revive that port so that Philadelphia can become more prosperous, from that perspective. So that's where, and we haven't really talked about a strategy for how that works, but I think we should talk about that, because why should we subsidize an export terminal? Why should we further tie our heating costs and electricity costs to world commodity markets because it's facilitated by pipelines and a rail network to export terminals in Philadelphia? Why is it okay in the Delaware River Basin for there to be a fracking ban to protect the water supply of everyone that's in that watershed basin? And why is it okay to not have that in the Ohio River watershed? And why is it okay for politicians in the eastern part of the state to tolerate a completely different standard for water quality from one part of the state and the other? So anyhow, those are just a couple of things. And our state constitution is statewide. Bob Schmetzer talks about our rights in the Environmental Rights Amendment in our Constitution. That's something that every one of us in our state needs to talk about and uphold and hold our elected officials accountable to, because rights that aren't defended are the ones that get eroded. And so we need to stand up and defend those things. So those are just a couple of quick thoughts. And I think we will also have some help coming to us from this summit. There are campaigns that are launched that have capabilities to go after multinational companies from a financial perspective. It would be great to mobilize that sort of campaign. I think we're going to be getting some help in that regard soon. There are also national policy questions to put stress on the plastics industry, which has such a thin margin, is wobbly, it's barely making its way. And so advice on how to capitalize on that wobbliness to put extra stress and strain on our friends at Shell. We can use some help on all of that. So anyhow, that's just a quick response. And I'll just end with this. Storytelling is the most powerful tool that we all have. That the more that we can tell our stories about what has happened and what is happening and what we see happening, and sharing that and supporting those stories, that becomes compelling. And the more that we can engage in that, I think the better off we'll all be. When I first started doing this work, in 2015, 2016, it was hard enough to get people together to make sense out of what was happening. And now look at all the things that have happened in the past 5 or 6 years. We can gather statewide for a climate conference and get a climate clock in Harrisburg, in our state capital. There's a lot that we can keep doing and building off of, and telling stories and holding the officials accountable who are responsible for folding 5 years ago and not pushing back more and not hearing your voices. I think it's time to hold them accountable as well too. So I'll just stop with that, and I appreciate the ability to have these impromptu comments. And I'll share my email address in the chat. Thanks.
Yeah, I see that Cheryl's got her hand up, and then I have a couple comments and frame a couple of questions. Leave us with some direction going forward, because this won't be our last engagement.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Rick Sorick. Cheryl joined the meeting, and I was listening intently, and I think this group is tremendously well-informed and talented and prepared to take on the challenges that are necessary. And as Matt mentioned, I agree that it is time to up the game, because our representatives feel that people are ambivalent and they don't see any pushback or enough pushback. And these meetings are tremendously informative. I would like to see as an outcome, people getting together to decide what to do next in terms of confronting our representatives who have created this unhealthy, untenable situation for so many people. And as Matt mentioned, 5 years ago, my representative, Mike Turzai, I can hardly say it. He lives a few blocks from me. He quit his term to accept an executive position at a utility. And it's just unconscionable and abominable. But I was thinking as I was listening to all of the excellent remarks that these representatives, some things that could be done are to go on their social media pages, and all the things that are in this chat, so many stories and so much information needs to be put there so that many people can see it and they can respond to it and have to react to it. But even more of a effective method, I think, is to organize people to go to the office of the representative en masse and meet with him and state what they need to have done. Bob, who was that guy who said the health board shouldn't be involved? Yeah, that's one of the people who should be visited by about 200 concerned citizens asking, why did you say this? How could you possibly say this? You can't get away with this. And I can't understand why we have a state, in our state constitution, one of the most special places in the country that has guaranteed clean air and water rights. And they're just being ignored and worse, trampled on. So there must be more than information sharing. And I would be happy to participate with, there's 70 people here. If we each found 2 or 3 people who are willing to do some things, we can get a lot of people's attention.
I thank you. And the picture on my screen is so small, I did not see it was you, Rick. As I said, Cheryl, sorry. I was just reading the name at the bottom and seeing the hand at the top. Let me just offer a few thoughts and see where this takes us going forward. One of the things I saw in the chat was, isn't it ironic? It's not really ironic. It's just business as usual. That Allegheny Health Network is building a cancer treatment center not far from the cracker plant. Even though the oath that's taken by physicians is that prevention is preferable to treatment. That's not the way our system works. And there have been those who suggested that, okay, so if the healthcare providers are making money on the disease, maybe we figure out a way to approach the health insurers, which happen to be the same because Blue Cross, Highmark Blue Cross owns Allegheny Health Network, and UPMC is an arm, UPMC Insurance Company is an arm of UPMC, that maybe there's things we can do in that direction. Second of all, and there is an election for county executive coming up in, oh, there we go. There's the cracker plant and there's the location of the Cancer Institute. Isn't that wonderful business practice? By the way, I once upon a time was on the board of a hospital, I won't name the name, but in the greater Pittsburgh area. And they don't refer to diseases like cancer and heart in the way you would expect. They refer to them as their business lines. And that's the way they treat it, unfortunately. And there's things that could possibly be done about that. 2, we do have an election coming up for Allegheny County Executive that might be a contested election, or highly contested election. Beaver County, as I understand it, doesn't have a health department. And here we are, we got the Allegheny County Health Department, and we're not doing a great job for Allegheny County. Who's doing a job for Beaver County when our county health department in Allegheny County isn't standing up to do the right thing? So I believe, I would just put this in, personalize it, that a lot of what the health department is or isn't able to do, or is or not able to focus on, is because of the political leadership of our county executive. And so he's term limited, he can't run again, Rich, and hopefully we can do something to change that picture. There was a question put in there about building a power base that doesn't depend upon the institutions that got us here. To a certain extent, we are the beginnings if we can find a way to connect ourselves, as we are trying right now, and we will continue to work on that with a group of concerned citizens in Allegheny County. We spent our time with our first town halls, except for the last one, which included both U.S. Steel and the cracker plant, pretty much focused on U.S. Steel, the Clairton Coke Works, your Thompson, et cetera. The bottom line being that we're stronger together in this. And now tonight we've had a thought about whether or not, this could be a statewide venture. We got elements around, and Matt puts on the table, all of these other interests in different parts of the country. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. We're not going to take on a global perspective, but, perhaps there is something to be done on a statewide basis that could really be effective. Listen, there's over 55 or 60 environmental organizations that are part of the Breathe Project. They all have their own mandate. They all do great work. The one thing we bring to the table that I think is a little unique, this is a grassroots group. It's residents who just are rolling up their sleeves to do something. And we're not beholden to an organizational structure necessarily. We want everybody's input, but we bring that voice of telling stories, as Matt put it, to reality. Because hearing it from one resident talking to other residents does have power. Ultimately, it's very frustrating. And when you show up, as I have shown up, and many people on this call have done this many more times than I have, but when you show up in Clairton and you get your chance to speak at the end of the meeting, and they give you 3 minutes and cut you off after 2, and don't take notes and don't seem to care what you have to say, we can create a different reality, hopefully. And the last thing I would leave with is Mayor Walker said something that is powerful. You're a lot younger than I am, Mayor, than I am. You're 47, I'm 80. You have a 5-month-old grandchild, you mentioned. The next generation needs to be involved, not at 5 months, but we have youth who really do care and who really do have an opportunity to come to the table. And there are organizations that work with young people in our Pittsburgh public schools, and likely we could connect them with people in Aliquippa or anywhere else and really have that voice come to the table. That would be unique. That's not where we've been before. And train a next generation that we don't have to be victims. We can actually do something. We can actually assume some responsibility and maybe create a little bit of a power base for ourselves. So there's a lot, I think, that offers potential here for us. And I really thank everybody for. We still got 61 people on this call. I don't know if I caught the highest number, but I did look down and see 84 at some point. That's impressive.
84.
84, okay. We did, through the good offices of a foundation, get a modest grant. We've hired through the resident town hall group an individual to help us with digital social marketing. So maybe we can get the message out further that way. We've redone our website so it's a little more effective. And, these are vehicles that could be used by anybody in these groups. We don't see that as our exclusive domain. So I think we've got the opportunity here to just continue to plug ahead. We will have another town hall probably by the end of the year or the beginning of next. And, there's a chance here. I see in the chat, science teachers in the public schools, they can help us on some of this. We have people on this call who have science backgrounds. And so there's a lot that can be done. For the moment, we can't count on the places that you would hope would be able to make a difference. But, I grew up in an era when I was a college student, and I did teach for a few years at a branch of the State University of New York, when there was a tremendous amount of activism on campuses, protests constantly. there could be protests that focus on Highmark and on UPMC health insurance. There can be, ways to organize. Pittsburgh is basically a college town in many respects, to be able to organize college students and get them involved in this way. We all have a stake in this. And these issues, if you're living in Pittsburgh as a student and you're going to move to somewhere else, we're all dealing with this. Climate change is going to take us by storm wherever we're living, literally and figuratively. So I think there's a lot that we can do here. And I just want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us, for being involved. Tell your friends about this, and let's make the next one another record breaker. I see, Bob, you had your hand up. You got one last comment before we sign off?
Yeah, while this was in progress, it was sold that everyone was going to get rich. And it carried a lot of weight. There was going to be jobs and money flowing everywhere. And a reoccurrence of the steel industry being here. That never transpired, never happened. And now that the cracker plant's getting ready to open up, I think you're starting to see a big change in public opinion in the fact that, are they going to lose their property values? Are they going to lose their health? So it's something we ought to be considering. It's going to be a big change coming soon.
I agree. And that 1.6 plus $1 billion subsidy by way of tax abatement, that went directly to Shell. It's not going to any people. And it's a sad reality, but the next possibility is it's going to be the green hydrogen initiative or the blue hydrogen initiative. If it's one that's real, it could be effective. It won't be one that's real, and we're going to be holding the bag and paying for it. So thank you, everybody. Here's a group of the individuals who were involved in sponsoring this town hall, and we look forward to everybody joining us at the next one.
Thank you.